All right. Good Wednesday evening. I know we're going to have some new people tonight, so I'm going to give it just a minute for notifications to go out so people can sign on. It doesn't take long, and I just appreciate everybody being here with us. I appreciate the love and the support and people finding us, and it's encouraging to have people, whether you log on to our Facebook page or you log on to our YouTube channel and watch it afterwards. It's very encouraging. So I hope that you're getting something out of it, and we are. Nobody here yet.
Yeah. When you do come on, please drop a hi in the comments. We really appreciate that.
I don't know if you heard Jenny or not, but she's saying to drop a hi in the comments when you come on. So please do that. So we're in Daniel chapter 8, and things have changed in the book. We talked for the last couple of weeks about what was going on in Daniel chapter 7, and now, up until Daniel started having these visions that really applied or were about Israel, but they were about other things too. He was writing to this history for the first 6 chapters to the Chaldeans, in Aramaic. It's a language that the Gentiles would understand, and now we're back into him writing in Hebrew, and this is part of the controversy, as I've explained before, about people saying that Daniel wasn't the author and he wrote the book it was written at different times by different people. Anyway, we're in this chapter of prophecy, which I get this sense that people look to prophecy because they're looking for answers. They want to either prove themselves right or have an answer, have a definite stamp on things. Prophecy is not given so it's making us understand everything. Prophecy is given for us to remember, for us to be reminded that God is in control. We understand prophecy by looking back, or we begin to understand it. We don't understand it fully, but we understand it by looking back. See, because if we were looking to do it our way, looking to do it in a way that makes sense to us, it probably wouldn't be the way that God has done things. Prophecy really exposes the fact that we need God's help. And prophecy assures us of God's promises. It assures of his goodness, of his power, and it keeps turning us back to him. That we need him, we need his grace, we need his wisdom. So we're going to be in a chapter here in chapter 8, and it's a chapter that a lot of things are talked about, and a lot of things are either have multiple meanings or interpreted some ways. I'm to the point in what I realize about prophecy is I'm glad God is God. And I'm glad that he is the one. Prophecy points me to him, to listening to him. And that's what this chapter really should be about, is listening to him, not saying this is exactly what it says and this is right, and if you don't believe this, then you're wrong, or you just don't understand the Bible right. We shouldn't be dividing over these things. We should be seeking to understand, but more than anything, we should be seeking the Lord. So, this vision is the next vision that Daniel had in the time of Belshazzar. And in reading the start of this portion of the letter that he wrote, remember, they didn't write chapter and verse, they just wrote. Daniel is really making a connection that the prophecy and what we know is Daniel chapter 8, the visions and the prophecy, they should be connected to what we've talked about in Daniel 7. There are similarities. There are also similarities to Daniel 2 and the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. But they all focus on specific things. And when you can look at them and light together, you get a better picture of everything. Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, focuses on, it had 5 kingdoms, four on earth and the eternal kingdom, which was signified by the stone. And Daniel 2 focuses on the first, the fourth, and the eternal kingdom. Doesn't pay a lot of attention to the second and third kingdoms. Daniel 7, what we spent a couple weeks in, focused on that last kingdom, the little horn, and the eternal kingdom, but doesn't really focus a lot on the first 3 kingdoms. Daniel 8 focuses, what we're going to talk about tonight, focuses on the second and third kingdoms, but not a lot about the fourth. But if you put them all together, you get a better view of all 5 kingdoms. So, I want to read the whole chapter to you, and then we'll try and talk about it, okay? So just bear with me, for it takes just a few minutes. Just bear with us, and then we'll try and unpack this a little bit. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that had appeared to me earlier. I saw the vision, and as I watched, I was in the fortress city of Susa, in the province of Elam. I saw in the vision that I was beside the Ulai Canal. I looked up, and there was a ram standing beside the canal. He had 2 horns. The horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one came up last. I saw the ram charging to the west, the north, and the south. No animal could stand against him, and there was no rescue from his power. He did whatever he wanted and became great. As I was observing, a male goat appeared, coming from the west across the surface of the entire earth, without touching the ground. The goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came toward the 2-horned ram that I had seen standing beside the canal and rushed at him with a savage fury. I saw him approaching the ram and infuriated with him, he struck the ram, breaking his 2 horns, and the ram was not strong enough to stand against him. The goat threw him to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one to rescue the ram from his power. Then the male goat acted even more arrogantly, but when he became powerful, the large horn was broken. 4 conspicuous horns came up in its place, pointing toward the 4 winds of heaven. From one of them, a little horn emerged and grew extensively toward the south and the east, and toward the beautiful land. It grew as high as the heavenly army and made some of the army and some of the stars fall to earth and trampled them. It acted arrogantly against the prince of the heavenly army. It revoked his regular sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary. In the rebellion, the army was given up together with the regular sacrifice. The horn threw truth to the ground and was successful in what it did. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one say to the speaker, "How long will the events of this vision last?" The regular sacrifice, the rebellion that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and of the army to be trampled. He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be restored. While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there stood before me, someone who appeared to be a man. I heard a human voice calling from the middle of the Ulai. Gabriel explained the vision to this man. So he approached where I was standing. When he came near me, I was terrified and fell face down. Son of man, he said to me, understand the vision refers to the time of the end. While he was speaking to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and made me stand up and said, I'm here to tell you what will happen at the conclusion of the time of wrath, because it refers to the appointed time of the end. The two-horned ram you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat represents the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes represents the first king. The four horns that took the place of the broken horn represent four kingdoms. They will rise from that nation, but without its power. Near the end of their kingdoms, when the rebels have reached the full measure of their sin, a ruthless king, skilled in intrigue, will come to the throne. His power will be great, but it will not be his own. He will cause the outrageous destruction and succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the powerful along with the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper through his cunning and by his influence. And in his own mind he will exalt himself. He will destroy many in a time of peace. He will even stand against the Prince of Princes, yet he will be broken not by human hands. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true. Now you are to seal up the vision because it refers to many days in the future. I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was greatly disturbed by the vision and could not understand it. I think that last verse is so powerful that Daniel, even after this vision was explained by the angel Gabriel to him, could not comprehend it. That to me it could not understand it. That to me says a lot, because Daniel was the one who, up till this point, was the gifted interpreter. That was his gift. He was given interpretations to all these other visions and everything else, whether it was Nebuchadnezzar's dream or it was the handwriting on the wall. All these things Daniel was the one they looked to, but he had this vision explained to him by Gabriel and still couldn't understand. He couldn't get his mind around it. He couldn't comprehend what was being said. Now let me tell you something here. There's a lot to this chapter. There's a lot of parallels in here. Okay? And some of it I just continue to kind of scratch my head on too. I don't have a full grasp of all that this says, but let's talk about it.
Can I ask you something, Rick?
Sure.
Is there anybody that has a full grasp?
God? I don't know. There are so many people that have so many things to say and want to appear that they have the wisdom or the authority to make these statements. And we know a lot of what took place because we have the ability to look back and see how some of these things that were prophesied in here that were the future to Daniel are passed to us. But there's some strong parallels to what took place and what was actually prophesied in here and to what may be happening at the end, to some of the things that we read and studied in the book of Revelation. So, Daniel is having this vision in the third year. He had a vision in the first year of Belshazzar's reign. Now 2 years later, he's having another vision. This vision is very interesting because as he has the vision, he sees himself in a different place. He's no longer in Babylon. He's no longer in this empire. He's in a Persian city, which should sound familiar to you because I know we've talked about this place in other books and things like that, but it's in Susa, which, if you remember Esther was in Susa. This is a city, it's a big city, but it means that it's a different time. What it really seems to be saying is that Daniel is going to outlive the Babylonian rule, the Babylonian Empire. He's going to continue to be part of leadership in the new ruling empire, world ruling empire. So he sees himself in Susa, in Persia, and he has this vision with about a ram. It says in verse 3, I looked up, there was a ram standing beside the canal. He had 2 horns. The 2 horns were long, but the longer one was, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one came up last. This is, and we know in the interpretation, this is a definite reference to the Medo-Persian Empire, to these kings, and the Media Empire was first, and Persia swallowed it up and became much more powerful. We know that from reading history. We talked about when Darius the Mede took over in Babylon, it wasn't because he was a king, it was he was appointed by Cyrus, the king of Persia. Okay, so in this vision, Daniel is explaining this, that this ram, what he sees, and he's talking just about what he sees before the interpretation, and he's being very, very descriptive. So he sees this ram, and it's, you got to remember that this Medo-Persian Empire took over the world. It not only took over all the Babylonian Empire, but it expanded the empire. And it grew. It's interesting the way it says it grew. It says, I saw the ram charging to the west, the north, and the south, which is the exact way that the Medo-Persian Empire, the exact way that Persia caused this empire to grow. And it became great and became powerful. For a time, this empire was the strongest empire on earth. Okay, this again is that second kingdom that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, that Daniel talked about a little bit in chapter 7. What?
My watch is weird.
Okay. In chapter 7, but this is that second kingdom. And as soon as he sees and he gets a full grasp of this empire, a full view of this empire, he sees a male goat. Interesting thing is a male goat coming from the west across the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground. That really says it's moving fast.
I don't understand the thing about the ram, but the goats were a sin/bad thing in the culture, says Marilyn. She's wondering if you could give any information on that.
Well, you got to remember that this is symbolic. Okay, the ram was a powerful animal, and it's really using that this is a powerful force that's really 2 empires together, and the being the length and the timing of the horns growing is really talking about what the ram is doing and how it becomes this world empire. Yes, goats, especially like the scapegoat and stuff, were to bear the brunt, to take our sin and be sacrificed to our sin. I think that the reference to the goat here and the goat and the ram is that a goat wouldn't seem as powerful as a ram, but yet it comes with fury, and it comes with force, and it comes with speed. Now, if you know a little bit about history, Persia was antagonistic toward the Greeks.
I was just going to say the thing about goats is they're obnoxious.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They're stubborn and obnoxious. Persia was antagonistic toward the Greeks. They were always trying to beat them down. They were always trying to take control. This reference to the goat in here, this goat that's coming fast, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. We know by history what happened. That when the Greeks became the world power, became the empire, it was because of Alexander the Great. And he took over the whole world in a period of about 3 years. They moved fast, they moved quick, they were struck with power. He was a genius when it came to battle. He was strong and forceful, and he was definitely, his intention was to make the Persians pay for what they've been doing to Greece. And you got to understand too, if you understand a little bit of the geography, Greek, it says it is coming out of the west, and Greece is west of Persia. So it comes in, and he's attacking Persia, and then he's going to take over the world. If you think about this for just a minute, because even though the Greek Empire ruled for quite a while, and Alexander the Great was only alive till he was 32, he wasn't even 33. Like I said, they took over the world in about 3 years. He died at 32. But what they did by this is really interesting. They gave the world an exposure to a common language. They were preparing. It was, in some ways, it was kind of God's way to prepare the New Testament to be written so people could understand it. Okay, you got to remember that you had the Jews speaking Hebrew. You had the Sumerians. You had the Babylonians speaking Aramaic. There was a lot of different languages. By the time of Jesus, most people at least had an understanding of Greek. So, just a side note there. So, this goat is attacking the ram, and he is doing this with fury, as it says in verse 6. And he broke the Medo-Persian Empire apart and took over. But like I said, he died. And after he died, after Alexander the Great died, it was thought that his 2 sons would take over. His 2 sons, because of their attitude, their arrogance, like Alexander the Great was arrogant. He was the king of the world. The 2 sons were murdered. So what happened was 4 horns, 4 generals of Alexander's army, of Alexander's world conquest, took over. And they each took an area. One took the north, one took the east, one took the south, one took the west. And they began to rule their areas. In this time, a little horn arises. Now, see, people hear this, and because Daniel's having these visions, and he's explaining them to the best of his ability, and we hear parallels, we think it's the same thing. Okay, in chapter 7, do you remember where the horn came out of? It came out of the 4th kingdom. It came out of the 4th beast. We're talking about, in chapter 8, the 3rd kingdom. The Greeks, the Grecian Empire. And the horn grows out of that. So while there's parallels, there's obvious differences too. And we need to understand that. Daniel and Gabriel go into really explaining about this little horn. And sorry, I'm flipping pages here. And it's important to understand what they're talking about. He said, from the little horn one emerged and grew extensively toward the south and the east and toward the beautiful land. Where is the beautiful land? Israel. So this little horn is trying to show its power and its strength, and it's going to rule over everywhere, especially Israel. I'm tripping over something right now, and in this time, when the Greeks, when the generals had taken over the areas, there was a king that arose, and his name was Antiochus IV. He gave himself the name Antiochus Epiphanes, which means the Magnificent One. He thought that he should be God. Okay? He thought that he should be the one everybody should worship. And through having a powerful army, and through manipulation and all the things that he did, he took over the world. He tried to take over the world. That's what I should have said. He eventually got to Israel, as which we find out here. It acted arrogantly, even against the prince of the heavenly army. It revoked its regular sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary. In rebellion, the army was given up, and together with the regular sacrifice, the horn threw truth to the ground and was successful in what it did. Antiochus Epiphanes, when he took over, when he started his persecution of Jerusalem, he stopped sacrifices, he stopped them worshiping, he demanded that they stop circumcising. He was going to be the one in control. He exalted himself as God. He built in the Holy of Holies an altar and a temple to Zeus.
Wow.
And then everyone's going, wow, is this sounding familiar yet? Are you seeing some parallels yet? After he built this altar and this temple to Zeus, he sacrificed a pig on the altar and spread pig's blood all over the inside of the Holy of Holies. And he forced the Jews to eat pork. This is really a precursor to what the Antichrist is going to be doing. He's an Antichrist of his own, really. Remember how John talked about in 1 John that there's Antichrists out there, there's a false Christ out there. Well, this is one that we see a definite example of. This is one that he's rebelling against God. And really what this tells you is Satan is always trying to get his way in. if you think about it, through the history of the Old Testament, Satan's always trying to find a way in. It goes back to the garden. It goes back to places like this, where he's trying to rule the world. He wants the worship. He wants the praise. It says, where did I read it here? It says, in the explanation that he will destroy the powerful people. He will cause deceit through his cunning and his influence and in his own mind, he will exalt himself. He will destroy many in a time of peace. He will even stand against the Prince of Princes. Yet he will be broken not by human hands. That's a reference to the last days. But we're seeing the example here. So Antiochus IV, Antiochus Epiphanes, is flexing his muscles. He's trying to rule the world. He's changed the way things are done. But again, this is really a prophecy that he plundered Jerusalem. He took all the riches. He took the temple over. He killed over 30,000 Jews, and he put another 40,000 into slavery. Now they had just come out of exile. I say just. This was 200 years after Daniel, but the Jews would have remembered what the exile was about. So, let's get to this interpretation so we can really see what Gabriel has to say. Daniel's watching in verse 15. 16, I heard a human voice calling from the middle of the Ulai. Gabriel explained the vision. He approached. Daniel fell on his face. Now, wait a minute. I thought Daniel was having a vision. How do you fall on your face in a vision? I don't know. I'm just like, okay. And he was terrified. He fell before him. And then when Gabriel started to speak in this vision, it says Daniel went into a deep sleep. I don't know. Daniel's reporting what's happening here. In the sleep, Gabriel touched him and said, stand up. It says, I'm here to tell you about what will happen. And this is verse 19. I'm here to tell you about what will happen at the conclusion of the time of wrath, because it refers to the appointed time of the end. This is where it gets muddy for everybody, because you start talking about this time of wrath and you start talking about the time of the end, and people are thinking, wait a minute, are we talking about end times, or are we talking about the end of this? This time of wrath, I think, that Gabriel is speaking of is twofold. There is an immediate thing that is going to be happening to the Jews, or a thing in the near future. This is this Antiochus Epiphanes. Remember, Daniel isn't around when this happens. The Jews had started to go back to Jerusalem when the Persians took over. Cyrus granted them the right to go back and build the temple. This is in the future for Daniel, but it's in the past for us. But there is a future for us that this is referring to, too. And that's where it gets a little bit confusing. Well, in chapter 7 in the vision, Daniel really wanted to be clear about the fourth beast. Asked questions. He didn't question things here. I think because he was just so overwhelmed by this vision and by what was going on. And he would be starting to see this transition. He could see how this was coming to pass. Because the time of Belshazzar was short. In 2 years, the Persians are going to begin running Babylon, and just a short time after that, they'll be running the world. Remember, Belshazzar was only king for 5 years. Daniel could see the transitions on the horizon. He knew what was going on. That meant he was aware of what was going on in the world. It's a lesson for us to be aware of what's going on around us.
Yes.
It's a lesson for us to continue to keep our focus on the Lord, to understand who He is, to know that He's in control, and to trust Him. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I don't know about you, but is there much that makes sense about what's going on in the world today? What it's saying here, the horn threw the truth to the ground and was successful in what it did. Haven't we thrown the truth to the ground today? Truth is relative. Truth doesn't have any weight. You know, you got something there.
Yeah. It's Marilyn writes this. It's even more confusing where in verse 14 it says these things last 2,300 days. I know you and I were talking about that earlier. Do the things add up to 7 years in this ancient kingdom? And then she says no sense now, just like nothing makes sense now.
Yeah. Okay, let me address the 2,300 days. I was going to do that in just a minute, but let me do it now. 2,300 days is about 6.5 years. Okay? It's interesting that this 2,300 days really means something. When Antiochus Epiphanes went to Jerusalem and began to defile the temple, he began to attack Jerusalem and defile the temple. But from the time he started until the time that the temple was restored by, what's his name, Maccabee, one of the Maccabees in 140 AD, it was 2,300 days till the time it was restored. Now, some people say that he meant 2,300 days. Other commentators will tell you that 2,300 days, because he's referring to morning and evening, are really referring to the morning and evening sacrifices, or the evening and morning sacrifices that the Jews made. They sacrificed twice a day to keep themselves pure and holy. And so that would be 1,150 days. Well, both these days work, because from the time Antiochus IV started until the temple was restored is 2,300 days. But from the time he defiled the temple, he went in and built the altar and sacrificed the pig and everything else and declared himself God, until the time that the temple was restored was 1,150 days, which is exactly half of 2,300 days. So you could argue both sides of this, but this is a reference to the restoration of the temple, and it's, I think, foreshadowing of the tribulation period. This isn't exactly the 7 years that it talks about. Again, two different horns. This horn is the third kingdom. This horn defiled Jerusalem, defiled the temple, everything else. The fourth horn that's coming in the future will defile the temple. It'll be in the middle of the 7-year tribulation. And he will declare himself God, and he will build there will be a statue of him built and placed in the temple, and he will demand worship, and he will sacrifice on the altar, because he will have stopped all sacrifices before then. So again, there's parallels here. Gabriel is explaining from the sleep what happens in this time of wrath. I think what Gabriel is talking about is this time that's coming a couple hundred years in the future first. when we get a little bit later, I think it's talking about the long future, the end times. But this is the end of where it says, I'm here to tell you what will happen at the conclusion of the time of wrath, because it refers to the appointed time of the end, the appointed time of the destruction, the defilement of the temple, and the temple being restored before it's destroyed again in 70 AD. But that's, again, a limited speculation, the best interpretation I could give you at the moment. That could change. This is one of these prophecies, one of these visions that's very, very hard to understand. The four horns that took the place of the broken horn represent the four kingdoms. They will rise from the nation, but without its power. The four kingdoms never had the power of Alexander the Great. But in the meantime, they're, with all this that's going on, is they're causing the Jews, they're causing people to go back and worship idols, to turn their back on God, to turn their back on their faith, and they're causing chaos and destruction in the world. Antioch Epiphanes is destroying, as it says in verse 24, he will destroy the powerful along with the holy people. He's not going to let anybody stand up against him. He will cause deceit to prosper. Through his cunning and by his influence in his own mind, he will exalt himself. He declared himself God. Historically, he declared himself God. And he wanted people to worship him. Yet it was by the power and the miracle of the Maccabees. I don't know if anybody's ever read the Apocrypha. There's some great history in there. In 1st and 2nd Maccabees, it's a detailed history about what happened and what really Hanukkah is about, and about the 8 days of oil, and how they were able to, in I think it's 1st Maccabee 4, how they were able to take over and take over the temple again and clean it up and restore it to the place that it's supposed to be. Gabriel tells Daniel, the vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true. Now you are to seal up the vision because it refers to many days in the future. Again, people think that that's end times, but I think it's really talking about 200 years after Daniel. There are some definite parallels to what's going to happen, but it just tells you, it continues to tell you what Satan's trying to do. And I'm not a big, let's talk about the devil and this and that, but we need to be aware, because you look at the parallels between what's happened here in Daniel 8 and even what's going on in today. People are leaving the church. They're turning their back on God. The truth is questionable. We're worshiping all kinds of other things. And in that same token, we're losing our sense of self and our sense of community. I read an article today on MSN Money. It's written by an agnostic who talked about what's one of the problems with people, or one of the results, I should say, not the problems, because he didn't believe in church, but people stepping away from the church. And he's really said we've lost our sense of community. We've lost our sense of not being able to build relationships with one another and depend on one another. And You know, one of the things I've learned in my few short years is that when people have problems, they tend to isolate. And I think that's what the devil wants from us, to make us feel like we're alone. Well, we're great at doing that now. People would rather look at a screen than they would sit across the table from somebody and have an honest and authentic conversation. And I'm not talking about tearing somebody down. I'm talking about life, about some of the struggles, some of the things we're concerned about really getting to know somebody and know what's going on with their family, know what their struggles are. There are problems all over the world today, and it's not getting any easier. And the longer that we exist here, the more we're growing, and the more circumstances and things are coming up to try and get in the way of our relationship with the Lord, and to try and distract us from loving God and loving others. And then, when that happens, we'll believe anything. What?
It kind of bridges the ages that we are really are in a cosmic battle for our souls.
Our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's against powers and principalities. I agree 100%. And the only way that we are going to get through this, it says in Amos, can two not walk together unless they agree? It says in Ecclesiastes, a cord of two is strong, a cord of three can't be broken. It's talking about the importance of relationships, the strength that comes from having that support. And support doesn't always mean agreement. Come on, parents. You always support your kid, but did you always agree with them? You always love your kid, but sometimes they scratch your head. We need to understand, as each day passes, we're drawing closer to the end. And I don't say that to minimize anything. I say that to say that we're aware. And I told you guys on last Saturday night in a sermon, I have a real problem with hell. And the longer that I'm here, the more that I see people going to hell. And it's not just that they're not sure about what they're doing, but they're rushing. They're running to get in line to go to hell because they don't understand the God that we know, the God that loves us, the God that cares, the God that has the answers. I probably didn't make much sense of this prophecy. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I'll read it again and I'll probably understand something else about it. That's the truth. What it does tell me is I'm grateful that God is in control. I'm grateful that I can take my questions and my problems to Him. It reminds me of what I want to leave you with. And that's a passage of Scripture from another prophet that contains a verse that I lean on all the time. In Isaiah 40, starting in verse 28, it says this: Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never becomes faint or weary. There is no limit to His understanding. He gives strength to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Youths may become faint and weary. Young men may stumble and fall. But those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint. When we keep our focus on Him, He has the answers. And we don't have to have the answer to know that we can trust Him and He's going to lift us up.
Marilyn makes another comment. She says the more easy our lives have become, the less we need each other. When times are hard, community is essential.
Totally agree. Completely agree.
You know,
We can have community in all kinds of different ways, family. We have community here with the groups of the 8 or 10 or 12 people that sign on it when we're live, and the 40 or 50 people that watch it. If you need encouragement, if you need strength, you can reach out. This is a way we can reach across the distance. Community is important. We need one another more than anything. And that's really what this message is about.
we're not opposed to taking phone calls for community, that's for sure.
We just need to be willing to lean on each other. We all need somebody to lean on, to quote Bill Withers. We're going to talk about a prayer next week. It's a very powerful prayer. And we'll move on from there. There's still more prophecy. There's still more visions to come. And there's still more things that are going to make us kind of take our breath away and scratch our heads. I hope I didn't make this too muddy for you. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for your word. We are so grateful for your love. We are so grateful for the fact that you communicate with us and want to help us along our faith walk. Father, that when it's unclear to us, we know it's clear to you, and we can rest in the fact that you have the answers. You're the one we can trust, and you care about all things that are happening to us. So God, be with us tonight as we begin to unwind and sleep and those things. Just give us rest. Give us peace. You said that you'll keep us in perfect peace if we keep our minds stayed on you. So help us with that fact, Father. Remind us of that fact. Even when we're walking through those dark valleys, we're grateful for all that you've given us, Lord. Be with us as we go and bring us back together safely. This we pray in your precious name. Just another reminder, we're on Saturday nights now at 6:30 Pacific time. Okay? We'll see you on Saturday night. Love you all.